Hello. I've made a small start on the baseboards for my Dawlish T Wall layout, a T-gauge railway based on Dawlish in southwest England. Because my intention is to fix it relatively high up in my railway room, it's not going to be practical to build it in situ. I decided to make it in two halves, each 1 metre by 40 centimetres. Fetching wood is difficult for me, and I'm unable to cut it accurately with my tools and skills, so I decided to try online, and found a company that do custom cut wood for a reasonable price. I came up with a rough idea of what I'd need, and a few weeks later it arrived. This is definitely the way to go. My thinking was that most of the base would be at the level of the rails, with it cut along the line of the sea wall, and have a beach part being lower down. This footbridge is about 3/5 of the way along the section that I want to model, but it looks like it would make for a very convenient way to hide the join between the baseboards, particularly as its east footing juts out from the rest of the sea wall, so I decided I'd have it there instead. Since the plywood cut was going to define the track alignment, I thought I'd best come up with a detailed plan before doing the cut. This grey line represents the whole track bed, drawn to scale over the baseboards. I didn't want the 180-degree turns at the end to be any tighter than the set track I've already got, which is 120mm radius, and I want the section over the baseboard join to be straight. An aerial view on Google Maps shows that the track alignment is almost symmetrical, and shows how far it comes in from the sea. Having got my plan, I measured where the sea wall curve starts and ends on one of the boards, marked those lines on the plywood, and then drew the curve by hand. It took a few attempts to get it looking right, but I think that was quicker and easier than trying to use scale printouts on A4 pieces of paper. Then for the bit I really don't like, the jigsaw. I did end up straying from the line, too much to compensate with sanding and not enough for the jigsaw, so I had to use a planer. This was harder than I thought it would be. I've used this planer to trim doors after having carpet fitted, which took a lot of effort and sweat, but wasn't actually difficult. But this plywood and bench just wanted to be pushed over, so I had to pretty much climb onto them to get the job done, but I got the profile I wanted in the end. This photo has a little distortion. The corner of this board is square in reality, but overlaying it with the plan it looks pretty close. Messy, noisy woodwork is best done without the family around, and I only had time to cut one of the baseboards on that day, which turned out to be a good thing. I'll explain more on that in a bit. Next up was more detailed planning about what to do for a frame. When I ordered the wood, I'd thought it would be a simple case of making a 30mm deep frame all around, and that I could then just lay the beach part in front of it without much of a frame. I intend to have optical sensors under the track in some places, in order to trigger signals that I hope to make, so generally avoided putting bits of frame directly under the track bed. I'll also need dropper wires, which will be easier to route if they don't need to go through a length of frame. It was only at about this point that I started to give proper thought to the brook and the land around it, which is much lower than the track level. I wondered about having a section cut out from the baseboard, so to get an idea of the size and what I'd need to do with the frames, I started drawing more detailed features. It got to the point where it was clear the frame wouldn't be strong enough. There'd be a long thin section at the back that would be the only connection between two areas of the layout, and a large area in the middle without any frame. Time to rethink. I concluded that the baseboard would need to go under all of this half of the layout, and to build raised sections on top of that. That's why it's a good job I didn't have time to cut it up. This means that the other half of the layout will need to be twice as high as it was going to be. For the northeastern half of the layout, I came up with this revised arrangement, where there'll be a lower frame for the beach part, and then an upper frame will sit on top of that for the walkway and track level, with these slightly darker frame beams being 60mm tall to firmly join the two sections together. The frame for the southwestern half was much simpler, all from 30mm high beams. Since the track on the southwestern half would now be entirely raised from the baseboard, I decided I'd need some more sections of plywood for it to sit on. I double-checked all the measurements and which bits of wood I'd need to get, and put another order in online, or at least I tried to. Having got through most of the process, the website then told me that no orders were being accepted while the warehouse is being reorganised. I looked for alternative companies, but the ones I found were ridiculously expensive, so I decided to wait. My cart was at least saved on the first website, so I wouldn't have to put everything in it again. But a bit of time for yet more thought turned out to be a good thing. The more I thought about scenic detail in the southwestern half of the layout, the more cramped it seemed like it was going to be, so I started to think about making this part of the layout longer than the northeastern part. I settled on increasing it to 1.2 metres, which I think will still be a manageable size, and decreasing the other to 0.8 metres. This means that the join hiding footbridge can be in a more realistic position along the line, which is a bonus. I still need a straight section of track over the join, so I tweaked all of the curves. Another bonus of the change is that it gives me enough room for the railway station to be parallel with the baseboards, and for a bit more of a curve heading northeast out of the station, as with the original. I made sure that everything stayed within the bounds of the plywood that I'd already cut, which I'll need to trim a bit further to match the updated track bed curvature, and I'll need to cut 200mm off the narrow end to put on the southwestern base. The wood website still isn't taking orders, so it'll be a while before I make any physical progress, but I can keep adding detail to the plan. That's all for now. Bye bye.